You're listening to the Docs and More podcast with Lovejeet Dhaliwal. I'm here at Sheffield Docfest and I've just seen an incredibly powerful film about Grenfell. I'm here with some of the filmmakers now. Nendie Pinto Duschinsky is the director of the film, and one of her collaborators is Adrienne MacKenzie. Can you remind me of how it came about?
Yeah, so I've met Nendie about 10 years ago at the Stowe Youth Centre or Community Centre, and that unfortunately has been shut down now due to government cuts. So we were filming post-closure about the closure of the community centre, and yeah, we just realised that a lot of people in the community that we knew were affected by the fire, and yeah, just slowly but surely we just decided to interview them just to get their opinions, get their views, and just see like the real raw emotion.
And how did you steer the project?
So I think at the time Adrienne was volunteering and filming from that night. Everyone was volunteering because it affected the people making the film, and we were coming back from volunteering, and the image you're seeing on the news was of a lot of angry young people, and of course there were angry young people, but the thing was that, and there was even some coverage of the volunteering, but the thing was it just wasn't what we were finding on the ground. So the point of making this film was to capture the atmosphere of how different it is from the news being on the ground, and I think what the young people and local residents in this film do so eloquently is that their dignity and how articulate they are and how bloody honest and open they are. I think it just has disarmed everybody.
What did you find perhaps one of the more challenging moments during this process?
Trying to separate myself from the actual task of filming, I found that very hard because I felt uncomfortable. I kept questioning, like, should we be doing this? But then no one else is doing it in an honest way. So I think that was the hardest thing for me, just to actually make the decision. Because even when we were, when Nendie was editing it, we kept going back and forth with emails like, should we put this in? Should we not? And yeah, in the end, it's actually had a more positive reaction than we all expected. We didn't know what to expect, but to me that was the most challenging thing, just to take the emotion out of it, to not, if I got too emotional about it, because obviously it's a devastating thing to see and to be around. I don't think we would have been able to stand together as a team to work together, and also to actually support those that were in need when we were there interviewing them.
You talk about how challenging it was, but of course you're also using footage from Snapchat, from people's phones, and all that stuff's kind of woven in. That must have been very difficult to edit, to use, or to place.
Yeah, so I'd say that it actually was really hard editing it, because it's really upsetting watching the videos back again and again. But what's interesting is we spoke to the editor at Channel 4 News. Channel 4 News did a piece on the film. He said that even some little clips we had, like there's one of fire inside the building, and they can't show that on the news. There was another one in the film, if you saw of a girl shouting, "I can't get out." And he said that actual piece of footage goes on for half an hour, because of course they had their cameras there rolling. So they've captured all this stuff that they don't want to re-traumatise people, but as editors they sit through it. And we were all talking about that process of trying to make this film. It was very hard to edit, basically.
What I really, really love about this film is the fact that we do actually see another face of Grenfell. We see the young people there, perfectly eloquent. That was obviously very important. Like you said, Nendie, it was very important to show, wasn't it, Adrienne?
Yeah, because the images that I kept seeing were of aggressive, loud young people, and not saying that their message was wrong, but the only thing that you're gonna take from it because of the packaging is the negative energy that that was portrayed. So I think it was very important for us to speak to people, to to speak to people face to face, and organically people just kept saying, oh, all of the young people helped us out. The young people were there on the ground, they were helping my family. When we spoke to Bilal initially, he said, when you interview me, is it okay if I bring about 5 or 6 of the young people that helped out to be interviewed? And I said, yeah, of course. And he was like, it's really important that they get their message across, because all of us, we're usually portrayed, whether you're black or you're white or you're from the Middle East, there's always a stereotype that's attached to that, especially when it's a young person involved. So it's just good that we can try to break these boundaries by interviewing them. So let's do it. And yeah, obviously we were really happy about that, because that's the ethos that we had for the film.
What has the reaction been while you've screened the film? Because you've screened it at quite a few
places. So we had some of the reactions I can tell you on my phone. So we have had a lot of support from Naomi Klein, the writer, and she came to see the film and said it was an incredible film, and she stood up and gave kind of a talk about, because she makes films as well, and so that was really nice to hear, because initially when we had approached The Guardian, they said it would need a lot of work to make it something that they could possibly use, because it's quite, it's raw, and you see edits and you see weird, you see less drop frames now than were in there. But so we took it to Parliament, and I think it was put in the National Archive as well, and the BFI put it in their archive. And then I think that Channel 4 News did a 16-minute feature on it. So I think that made us feel a bit vindicated in our approach, basically, because at first people, say with the Guardian thing, had been like, well, it's not really something we could use. He was saying even though the young people are nuanced, it's not something that would be new to our readers. Whereas I think that it's the little things and the moments and how broken the people are and how they're trying to cope. That is what has, if you just took a soundbite, it wouldn't be as powerful.
You also screened it in front of Parliament, didn't you, to the Labour Party as well?
Yeah, so we initially had a screening at the Labour Party conference, so that was at one of the local theatres in Brighton, but that was an audience of a mixed crowd. Then we had the 6-month anniversary screening, which was at Parliament, and that was
all party, cross-party?
That was cross-party as well. Yeah, so that was the first time Grenfell United actually spoke in Parliament publicly, and that was a chance for 4 of them to actually tell their story. And yeah, we had a very massive response to that. Lots of MPs came. We didn't give them the opportunity to ask questions then. It was just literally a chance for them to sit down and listen and watch the film. And after the event finished, we were getting kicked out the building. They were still there. The MPs stayed to actually have conversations one-on-one. So a few months down the line, we had a few months later.
Yeah, we've just had another Parliament event in May with 100 MPs, where then one of the things we noticed at the film screening is that where the power was in the conversations in the corridor, that ability for MPs to speak directly to bereaved and survivors and to hear what's been happening to them, to speak to them as people. And it didn't matter what parties, they were from all parties. And so we had this event because we have Grenfell United campaigning to have extra panel members added, and they have other things they're campaigning for as well. And it was just for the speaker to host that and to have so many kind of cabinet ministers and the shadow cabinet to come to talk to them. You can see people are crying, because if you're speaking to someone who's lost their kids and their family, unless you've got a heart of stone, that is going to affect you. And so I think that, yes, I definitely don't think that the government has done enough, and I don't think their words have necessarily matched their deeds, but I also think you have to reach out and not just say, people are too polarised and too binary, and we need to reach out and say, this community could have been your community, they're just like you, this could have happened to you.
Having had that screening with the MPs and having had that reaction, do you feel that also perhaps that some of them were perhaps not aware of the people, or perhaps of the type of people who live in these tower blocks?
I think that's definitely helped to raise awareness on that. from every single event that we've actually had, even from the very first one that we had at the Frontline Club, the reaction straight away, everybody's brought to tears, because you don't know what to expect. You only see, like I said before, one side from the media. So I think it definitely has opened people's eyes. It did bring a more human side to it, not to the actual survivors, but the whole the whole tragedy that's happened has brought a human side to it, where it's not just headlines. It's literally like, come and have a conversation with me. And the amount of MPs that actually came through the doors, they didn't have to. They came through the doors. They didn't really they didn't have an ego. They just came. They spoke.
I don't know that they did not have an ego. But I think that what I guess we're saying is that you have to just. You can be cynical, and we're all cynical, but at the end of the day, if you just kind of open your heart and you just are so honest and you just cut through all of that, it is so sad what has happened and so terrible that, you know, if people can speak to the people directly affected, I certainly think it changes perceptions. You know, and the number of people who don't know anyone who lives in a tower block, and maybe, for example, many people who lived in Grenfell, you know, international lawyers, you know, investment bankers, a surgeon, you know, I'm not saying everyone had to do that, and not everyone who lived there was high flying, but there certainly were high flying businessmen, businesswomen living there. Just because they are, you know, first generation immigrants, whatever, or just because they live in a tower block, it doesn't mean that we should be frightened of them or have these kind of preconceived ideas of who they are.
If those who are listening to this podcast and they want to do something to help, what can they do now?
If people do feel kind of touched enough, I think a lot of people have been touched by Grenfell, because it could be any city. It's a national issue, any city in this country. If they go to www.supportgrenfellunited.org and you put, it's totally free, you just put your name and your email in there, and then the survivors and bereaved just send you newsletters when they're campaigning, when they're doing events, and we just so appreciate the support for that. And I'd also just say to anyone that on the 14th of every month, which is the day Grenfell happened, 14th of June, there is a silent march where people come, people bring their kids, people bring their dogs, and we just all walk in silence, sort of very much around the tower, and it is so moving just to be with people, just support the bereaved people at the front with the banner. And I've never, the firefighters line up on either side and they hug them and thank them, and I've never seen anything so moving in my life. And I would just encourage people, if they're outside of London, they could come down on to one of the walks on the 14th. And there are other walks taking place in Manchester, Southampton. Even they might want to start their own silent walk in solidarity with the big one in London.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I really hope that the message that you're trying to tell in the film does get across. You've been listening to the Docs and More podcast with Lovejeet Dhaliwal. If you enjoyed the show, review and subscribe to the series.